Reggie Harding died one of the most tragic deaths. An argument ended with him being shot not once, but twice, and it ultimately took his life. It was a sad ending to a life already filled with pain, suspensions, drug problems, and constant setbacks. His story was never smooth, and it always felt like things were spiraling. So let's dive in and uncover what was really going on behind the scenes. From the outside, Harding had all the tools to be great. He was the first player ever drafted into the NBA straight out of high school, and at 7 feet tall with raw talent, people expected big things from him. But behind the scenes, his life was falling apart. Harding's troubles with the law were constant. He was arrested not once or twice, but 11 different times. Drugs quickly became a major problem for him, especially heroin. He got hooked during his NBA suspension in 1966, and it wasn't until 1969 that he reportedly managed to shake the addiction. But by then, so much damage had already been done. And it wasn't just the drugs or the arrests. There were darker parts to Harding's story too. While he was still in high school, he was accused of raping Florence Ballard, one of the original members of the Supremes. According to reports, it happened outside a Detroit ballroom, and it was at knife point. Though the case never saw a courtroom, the accusation followed Harding for the rest of his life, casting a long, disturbing shadow over his legacy. By the time he returned from suspension, things weren't any better. Harding was known to carry a pistol in his gym bag, something that made both teammates and coaches incredibly uneasy. Dave DeBusschere, one of his former teammates, once said that most players kept their distance from Harding. He was often isolated, not just because of his behavior, but because people genuinely felt unsafe around him. And with stories like the ones that followed, it's easy to see why. During one TV interview, Harding openly threatened to shoot the Indiana Pacers general manager, Mike Storin. He also reportedly threatened to shoot his own teammate, Jimmy Rail, while they were rooming together. That kind of behavior made it almost impossible for him to build any trust with those around him. By June of 1968, things had taken an even darker turn. Harding ended up in Detroit General Hospital, not for a basketball injury, but because he was in police custody while being investigated for an armed robbery. Just a week later, he came back to the same hospital, this time with gunshot wounds in both legs, from a completely separate incident. It was like trouble was chasing him at every corner. In 1969, Harding was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison for carrying a concealed weapon. He served his time in southern Michigan prison and was released in June 1971. After getting out, he tried to turn his life around and make a return to the NBA. He wanted another shot at the game that had once been his escape. But by then, no team was willing to take the risk. His name had become too toxic, his past too heavy. Then came the final chapter, the one that sealed Reggie Harding's tragic story. On September 1st, 1972, he got into an argument with a man named Carl Scott. The fight didn't end with words. Just 20 minutes after the confrontation, Scott shot Harding twice in the head. Harding was rushed back to Detroit General Hospital, the same hospital he'd been taken to after previous incidents. But this time, there was no recovery. He died the next day at 1:30 p.m. Before Reggie Harding's life unraveled off the court, he had a basketball journey that was just as wild and unpredictable. He didn't follow the usual path, and from the very beginning, he was already making history and headlines. In 1962, the Detroit Pistons took a chance on a local kid with huge potential. They selected Reggie Harding as the 29th overall pick in the NBA draft, making him the first player ever drafted straight out of high school. That alone should have been the start of something big. A 7-footer with raw skills and a strong presence in the paint, Harding had the kind of physical tools that most players could only dream of. But there was a catch, a big one. At the time, the NBA had strict rules about player eligibility. You couldn't just jump from high school to the league unless you had been out of school for at least 1 full year. Harding had spent some time at a prep school in Tennessee, and that brought his eligibility into question. The NBA ruled that he wasn't technically allowed to play just yet, so despite being drafted, he couldn't suit up for the Pistons in the 1962-63 season. The Pistons front office, led by Fran Smith, knew they were walking a fine line, but they wanted to protect their rights to this promising player. Other teams were circling around Harding, and Detroit wasn't going to let him slip away without a fight. Eventually, the NBA Board of Governors allowed the Pistons to keep his rights, but with one condition: he couldn't play in the league until the 1963-64 season. With the NBA door temporarily closed, Harding turned to the Midwest Professional Basketball League. He played for teams like the Toledo Tartans and the Holland Oilers during the 1962-63 season, trying to stay sharp and get ready for the opportunity that lay ahead. Then in 1963, the Pistons drafted him again, this time with the 48th overall pick. He officially signed with the team, but his debut was delayed once more, this time for disciplinary reasons. Harding was involved in a police investigation, and the Pistons decided to keep him off the active roster until things settled. During this downtime, the Pistons sent Harding to a 5-day basketball clinic run by Dr. W.M. Hardy, a chiropractor in North Carolina, who also advised the team. At the time, Harding only had one go-to move, a right-handed hook shot. But by the end of the clinic, he had reportedly learned to shoot every shot in the book. It was clear he had the physical tools. The real challenge was everything else. On January 18, 1964, the NBA finally gave the green light for Harding to join the Pistons roster. At that time, he had been playing exhibition games with the Harlem Road Kings. When he finally hit the NBA court, he didn't waste time making an impact. Just 4 games into his rookie season, he became the Pistons' starting center and held on to that role for the rest of the year. Harding averaged 11 points per game that season and played so well that even Boston Celtics legend Red Auerbach took notice. Ahead of the 1964 NBA draft, Auerbach said, "Say what they want to about all the fine big fellows coming out of college in 1964. But the Pistons already have a guy who probably will outshine them all." That was high praise from one of the league's sharpest minds. Going into the 1964-65 season, expectations were sky high. People thought Harding could soon be mentioned in the same breath as the league's top centers: Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Walt Bellamy, and Nate Thurmond. He had the size, the skill, and the stage. But what he didn't have was discipline. Harding quickly developed a reputation for being careless and unprofessional. He skipped practices, slept through meetings, and once missed a team flight for a game against the Baltimore Bullets. His attitude was starting to wear thin on coaches and teammates alike. Things got even worse in August 1965. Harding was charged with assaulting a Detroit police officer over a parking ticket. The NBA had seen enough. In September, they suspended him indefinitely for conduct detrimental to professional basketball. A month later, he was found guilty of the assault and battery charge and fined $2,000 by the Pistons, a record fine in the NBA at the time. As a result, he missed the entire 1965-66 season. Still, Harding wasn't ready to give up on basketball. In September 1966, he threatened legal action against the NBA if they didn't lift his suspension. Eventually, the league gave in, and he signed a 1-year deal with the Pistons for $15,000. Some hoped this would be his fresh start. Pistons player-coach Dave DeBusschere was especially optimistic, calling Harding at least the 5th best center in the league the last time he played. But the comeback didn't last. In October 1967, the Pistons traded Harding to the Chicago Bulls for a 3rd-round draft pick. Just 2 months later, the Bulls waived him after he overstayed a leave he was granted to attend his adoptive mother's funeral. Once again, discipline, or the lack of it, got in the way. In January 1968, Harding got another chance, this time in the ABA with the Indiana Pacers. He was known for his physical style of play, but even that got him into trouble. During one game, he elbowed Denver Nuggets player Byron Beck in the mouth and had to run off the court as Beck chased him down. Despite the chaos, his teammates admitted he had talent. "He was a clown, but he had talent," said Roger Brown. "He was really physical and mean, but we couldn't keep him on the court." Pacers general manager Mike Storn even had to assign Ollie Darden to look after Harding, feed him, lend him clothes, and make sure he showed up to games. That's how unpredictable Harding had become. Eventually, the Pacers had enough. After missing practices and constantly clashing with team rules, Harding was suspended during the playoffs. Teammate Jerry Harkness later said the Pacers could have been ABA champions that year if Harding hadn't gotten himself kicked off the team. After the season ended, the Pacers waived him too. By then, Reggie Harding's basketball career was essentially over. What started with so much hope and hype had turned into a trail of suspensions, fines, and missed opportunities. He had all the talent in the world, but he couldn't stay out of his own way. His story was already becoming less about basketball and more about what might have been. And that wraps up today's video. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.